Well, hello and welcome to Get Smarter and Make Stuff. I'm Craig. Today I'm going to be talking more about my experiments to find a replacement for two-part silicone to make molds in order that I can then make a wax version of that and then do burnout casting. You'll want to have watched the previous part on this. Since this follows on, I'll put a link up here. And I gotta say, I almost didn't publish this video. I recorded a whole bunch of video, did a ton of editing, and when I got done, I just thought about tossing it out because frankly, it was a process full of frustration. But I decided that it's all part of it, right? It's all part of getting smarter and making stuff, is making mistakes, learning from those mistakes. This particular set of experiments didn't seem like it taught me that much, other than that I was not doing the right thing. But I think it is actually getting me to get somewhere, and I hope you'll find it useful as well. It's a pretty long video, I will warn you. Feel free to skip ahead to the end where I'll do a summary. But you might find the process interesting. I will say the other big reason that I decided to do this video is a video that James Cloud just put out, and I'll link that up here as well, where he talks about the value of making mistakes. And I had already kind of decided that I was going to put this video out anyway, but seeing that really cemented it for me. Definitely want to check it out. Anyway, that's enough for now. Let's go ahead and get started, and let's see what kind of progress I could make in figuring out alternatives to two-part silicone molds. Alright, here we are back at the bench, and you can see that I've been doing quite a bit of experimenting since the last time I did a video. Got a ton of these little wax Leonardo heads. But I think I've come to some conclusions. There's a lot more research I could do. I keep furthering this, but I've got enough that I think it's useful to talk about it. I think I actually have something in the form of an array of options that I understand the trade-offs now, and that I could choose what fits the situation, and I'd like to share that with you. So first of all, let me follow up a little bit on last time. So these are the silicone caulk molds that I made, and you can see that they were all made in this 3D printed mold that I made, and you can see that they have all shrunk like a lot. I've got a new camera here. I should fix the focus. How's that? Is that gonna work? Okay. You can see that they've all shrunk like substantially, right? That's just like major shrinkage. And the thing I was hoping last time was that sand would help. Did not turn out. Let me go find the sand one. Is not here. I've got this one anyway. So this is one that I fill with a finer white sand, and it did shrink a bit less. We grab a cup here. You can pop it. It's really hard to do this through the camera. You can pop it in the cup, and I don't know how well you can see that. You can see there's a bit of space around the sides. It's not quite down at the bottom, but it shrank less. But here's the thing: it's hard. Like, it is really just like very hard. It is no longer flexible, and I can feel that the outside is harder than the inside, so it's continuing to get harder throughout. And this would not remain flexible, which, you know, you'd need in order to be able to pull things out of the mold. So this is the two-part silicone mold that I made with the good stuff, the Umu 30, and if we put this back into the original mold, what we'll see is that it's perfect, right? It's exactly the same size. It's still flexible. It's wonderful. This stuff remains the gold standard, and I did not achieve getting results that would be equivalent to this, exactly as good as this stuff. But I think we got pretty close under certain constraints, and we'll talk about that. Okay. Oh yeah, here's the other sand one. Yeah, so this is the same thing. The sand mold got really, really, really hard. Same thing here, and actually you can see the shrinkage a bit better here. Right, that's just play sand. It really, I don't think that was a fruitful avenue. It just winds up hardening the mold too much. Okay, so I thought what I would do is start by making a mold of our standard model, because I've done this in a bunch of sizes. You can see that these two are a little bit different. I've got this big one that I printed just for fun, and kind of you can see the object a little bit better. And this is in clear because I ran out of the gray. All I had was clear. But I thought what we would do is make a mold of this in every technique that I found to be viable, and there are 3, and I'll talk about those. And we'll use this exact same mold. So then we can compare the results that we get in the end. And like I said, there's a bunch of different sizes, so let's just print just this one. So I will go ahead and start by making a mold of this using the UMU 30 because we know that's going to work and that's going to be our sort of standard of comparison. So let me get that going. I will put a link to a Thingiverse page where you can go and parameterize one of these printable shells. I've actually done them in a few sizes. I think I maybe showed this last time. I have a slightly bigger one. This is in a pretty cool looking PET G that I had sitting around. And an even bigger one in, this is ABS. Doesn't really matter, I guess. But they're all the same. They all just are a 2-part shell that goes around. And you can tape that up and pour your mold in it. But it's just a little circle with a lip, and then, you know, 2 halves. I think it works great though, because you can pull them apart afterwards, and that works really well. Anyway, let's go ahead and do this. Okay, it's been a couple hours. This should be set up now. And I know you saw me fumbling around with that earlier, having it overflow when I put it in the vacuum chamber. Oh well, we should still get a good enough result here to show what we're trying to show. So let's peel this open. Okay, so let's see if this is flexible enough to pull the model out without cutting at all. I don't think it is. I think we're going to make a little bit of a cut there. Hopefully not too much. The more we can leave this intact, the easier it will be. Okay. Okay. So, looks good there, and kind of, let's see, pull this up close to the camera. Maybe you can see down inside there. I think you can see a little bit. The detail looks good. This should be pretty good, but let's go ahead and test it out. Let's fill this up with wax. Okay, let's talk about the silicone molds. So if you recall from last time that we had 2 problems with these. One is they shrink a lot. It's really hard to do this through the camera. One is that they shrink a lot. We can see that it's got a lot smaller. And the other one was that the mineral spirits in the mix here leaches into the wax that you pour in, and it causes it to be soft, and the surface of the molds gets really gummy. Let me sort of see if I can show you what I mean. Focus. There we go. So this one doesn't show it too well, but like you would just touch it and all of these details would just sort of erode away. You can kind of see, I mean, I'm forcing it there, but that would happen with just the slightest touch. So that's 2 problems. So I actually realized that if you think about it, this silicone, we don't actually need it to stay the shape and size that it is forever, right? These 2-part molds are great because they're stable, like they'll stay reusable for a long time and you can use them over and over again. But of course we said the problem is that they're expensive and it's hard to use up all the material. But this is cheap. Much, much cheaper, in fact. I don't know what I paid for a tube of silicone is like $3 or $4. It is, I'm looking at a tube here, it is, I don't know, call it 300 or 400 grams, you know, You can get 2 or 3 molds this size out of it. It's a few pennies more for the mineral spirits, and cornstarch is basically cheap. So you're talking about very, very little investment for one of these. Like probably, if I had to guess, it's under $1 all told. So why not just use these once and then throw them away? Like if we can get that to work, that's still cost effective. A lot of time I'm only making one of something anyway. I don't necessarily need to bang out a mold over and over and over again. And if I do, well, then this stuff suddenly becomes more practical, right? Like you can use this, and maybe this one cost me, I don't know, $5, because I can get, you know, really optimistically, say 8 molds out of a container of this stuff, which is like $40. So, you know, maybe this is $5, but that's fine. Maybe it's more if I'm not using as much. Regardless, this can be very cost effective. But we still have the problem of the wax figure getting all smudgy, like I was showing you. And the trick I found there was that when you pour the wax into the silicone, which you have to use right away, because like I said, it's going to shrink, but you have a few hours, you know, or a day before it really shrinks significantly, then you put the whole thing in the freezer, it counteracts the smudginess by firming up the wax, even though it's got mineral spirits in it, and you can actually get a good combination of detail and cost. Like you can wind up with something, you know, that uses the cost benefits of this, overcomes the problems that we're having with smudginess, and the only drawback really is that it's a one-time use thing. Like this silicone mold, you can use it once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times before it shrinks, you know, to the point where you can't use it anymore. But whatever, perhaps that's enough for your case, and you're good to go. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and show mixing up some of the silicone batch. We'll put it in the freezer, and we'll look at what the result is, and when it's all done, we'll be able to take a look at the two and compare them side by side. All right, I've gone ahead and popped the wax out of the 2-part silicone mold. And you can see I actually had to separate the mold down the sides like this. It's just not quite flexible enough to pull that wax figure out without damaging the mold, which will be interesting in a minute when we look at how the silicone caulk performs. And let's get a close-up here. Let's get that to focus. I think you can see that this has nice detail. This is what we'd expect. That little blemish there is actually from the model where I plugged up the hole to let the resin run out so it wouldn't be a hollow chunk full of toxic resin. Anyway, pretty good results. The back is a little concave. That's because I poured all the wax at once rather than going in stages, and so when it cooled a little unevenly, but I think you can see that we got good detail there. There might be a few minor artifacts, but if you saw when I was pouring the silicone, I didn't do a great job of degassing it, but I'm pretty happy with this. I feel like if I made this into a plaster mold, it would be pretty good. So we're going to try to do the same. And like I said, the key here is that we can use the mold right away. We're going to essentially consider it to be disposable, and we will freeze the wax once we pour it, and that will prevent the mineral spirits from making it so soft that we can't use it. So let's go ahead and show that happening. So my formula that I've been using, I'm not saying this is necessarily the only way to do it. I think there's been a bunch that have worked pretty well, but I found that using a formula of roughly 100 grams of, clean cup here, 100 grams of silicone caulk to 125 grams of mineral spirits with 20 grams of cornstarch has worked pretty well for me, and I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to attempt to pour the mineral spirits here with the camera in the way, which I have a hard enough time making this not spill even when there's not all this set up to deal with. So, and I got to try to read the. Oh, why did that just shut off? Okay, got to try to read the weight at the same time. All right, 122, close enough, and I made a huge mess because I still have to figure out a way to pour that mineral spirits without making a giant mess like that, but oh well, it'll evaporate. Okay, so I have found that it works pretty well to put the cornstarch into the mineral spirits and kind of mix them together. So let me go ahead and zero that. I don't know if you can read the scale or not. Just zeroing that out. And put about 20 grams in there. That's 12, 20. Okay, great. And I don't think that's critical. I think you could use a lot more cornstarch and maybe you'd speed up cure time, but then maybe you'd have less open time. I don't know. I haven't really played around with that all that much. I've been pretty happy with where I've gotten to, where the whole thing sets up in, a couple hours. Actually not that different from the 2-part silicone. That has a cure time of like 75 minutes. I think I've been using 3 hours as a number for the setup that I'm using, so really not too different. I mean, you walk away for a while basically. All right, and then 100 grams of the silicone caulk, which is the same Gorilla White formula. I think you could use pretty much any silicone one. I haven't, again, played around too much with different brands. I did mess briefly around with a high temperature silicone, which is kind of interesting. I might play with that later to see if you could pour pewter directly into it, for instance, and see how that goes. 70, 80, 90. All right, and there's 100 grams. Okay, set that aside. And then, just like you get to do with all of the other ways of doing this, you get to mix. Mix and mix and mix and mix. You know what they say about resin and silicone, you mix until you think it's all mixed, and then you mix some more. This one, I actually don't think it's super critical that you get the caulk completely dissolved, like completely broken up. Like I've done it where there's been just a few lumps left in it, like it's mostly liquid, and that seems to work okay. The big thing is we're trying to get it thin enough to where we can pour it around the figure just like we did with the 2-part silicone and have it flow around and then be able to put it in the vacuum chamber and degas it so that we don't get any bubbles and we get a nice tight adherence to the model. Now what I'm doing here is I've got a popsicle stick and I'm just kind of smashing it against the sides, trying to get that silicone to dissolve into the mineral spirits. It does take a while, so probably fast forward through this. Okay, there that is, and you can see it's still a little bit lumpy, but like I said, that hasn't really seemed to be a problem. It's pourable, obviously that's like nice and thin, we're going to be able to pour it around the model, so let's go ahead and get that set. And I'm using the exact same figure as last time, using the exact same mold setup, so I've got this shell set up where I'm just going to tape that around. Where do I put my tape? Here we go. And let's be smart actually. Let's degas before I put it around the mold because that will work a little better. So, get this in the vacuum chamber, and actually I want a paper towel under that just in case it bubbles up. You saw last time it made a big old mess by bubbling over. I have a little bit more room with the cup than I do with the mold, so put this in here. Okay. And we have about, I actually haven't measured, but the open time is probably something like 20 minutes. It's not too bad, like you don't have to go in a hurry. We are kind of fighting against the cornstarch, setting up that silicone caulk. But, like I said, I haven't tried playing around with the ratios to see if maybe that would give you a better balance of open time. Alright, I never know how long to do this for, but I'm going to go ahead and call that good. It didn't seem like it was bubbling very much. Maybe, for whatever reason, I didn't wind up with that much air entrained this time around. Okay, so, should still be pourable. We should still be okay on open time, and if I was smart, I would have used the time to tape my mold together, but I didn't. Again, I'll put the model for this up on Thingiverse if you decide you want to 3D print, but you could use a soup can or whatever here. Just need some place to pour the silicone. Okay. And we can pour our degassed. It's starting to thicken up a little bit here. Just so you can see maybe. But it still pours. And then just to make sure that there's no bubbles like right down next to the mold, I'm going to give it another degassing here. Okay. Alright, like I said, I never really know how long to do this for, but just try to get some of the bubbles out, maybe get it to settle in right against the model. And then I'll just top this off with the extra that we already degassed. Since it's not going to be sitting right against the model, it shouldn't matter if these have a few bubbles in it. And you can see that's still liquid. It's been about 10 minutes maybe since I mixed it up. And it's thicker. Like, it started out pretty watery and it's already starting to thicken up a bit. But still completely workable. Alright, and that is it. We will have to let that sit for a couple hours. I have the cup, actually. I can come back and check to see when this is solid. Then I'll know that the model probably is, and we'll show you how easy it is to demold, and then we can move on to doing the wax pour. Remember, the point of this is that these are disposable. So once I have the model, I will have a limited time, probably a day. I mean, certainly when I've done it right away, it's been fine. Even a few hours later is fine. But call it something like a day. And as long as we use it within that time, probably in pretty reasonable shape. But we will see how it shapes up to the ideal one that we made with the 2-part silicone. I think it's going to be pretty good. We'll see. Alright, we're back. It has been a few hours, I think 3 hours since I did this, which is usually about how long I wait. And again, sorry I'm a little awkward in front of the camera here, but you can kind of see that this has, usually it comes out in one piece. This has pretty well solidified. I can feel down there. Yeah, it's pretty solid. So I think we're good to go on this. So let's go ahead and bust this open. Let me set this aside, actually. Okay, try to keep this in frame. Because I think one of the interesting things about this is that demolding it is actually even easier than with the 2-part silicone. This stuff is pretty soft. It's a little softer than the 2-part. Certainly when it comes right out of the mold like this, where it's just set up sometime in the last couple hours. It does stick to the sides a bit. I'm just trying to get it loose of the sides there. Just going to peel it. Just let's go a little bit at a time. And yes, it generally is this difficult. But it does come. It just takes a little while. Okay, great. Alright, and I don't know if you can see that, but to get focus, yeah. Just a little bit. Come on, focus. I don't know if you can see it, but it's picking up the mold has actually picked up the layer lines from the 3D print. For what it does, I think it's because it's so white, the camera doesn't want to focus on that. But the point being that it's taking detail from the 3D print at a pretty fine level, which is nice. That's what we're looking for, obviously. Okay. All right. So, one of the great things about demolding this is it's so stretchy that we can usually pop the mold out of here and even turn it completely inside out like this. So you can see there's nothing left. There's no residue on the mold. So what we should have is an intact impression inside, right? And in fact, if we can kind of peek down in there, I know it's very difficult to see down in there, but it does look like we've got good beard detail. There's a little bit of, oh, you know what that is? That's actually the two-part silicone in there that adhered just down in there. There's a little blob. The two-part silicone adhered to the mold, the model rather, and it's now in here, which actually says something, that this stuff sticks to the mold less than the two-part silicone does, or at least somewhat. Anyway, this is now ready to pour. And because it is so soft, we can, if we want to, support it with the mold base just to make sure that the weight of the wax doesn't deform it at all. I don't think that's really necessary, but can if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and get some wax melting, and we will pour it in there. And then the key thing is, because this has still got mineral spirits, if I held this up to my nose, I would smell two things. Mineral spirits and vinegar, because it's still curing, and the silicone caulk is a vinegar cure. It's an acetic acid cure. It releases acetic acid during curing, so you will smell vinegar quite strongly. If you're sensitive to that sort of thing, be aware. You know, make sure you good ventilation, all that. But there's mineral spirits as well still coming off of this. And like we said, the mineral spirits will soften the wax. So the trick is, we pour the wax, we stick the whole thing in the freezer, and then when we pull it out, the cold of the freezer hardens the wax, even though it's been softened by the mineral spirits, and should allow us to retain the detail. That's been the results I've gotten. But let's go ahead and I will heat some wax up, pour it in here, stick the thing in the freezer, and come back in a few hours and show you the results. All right, we are back, and this has been in the freezer overnight, which is maybe a little bit longer than I should have left it, but I kind of ran out of time. One of the things you might just be able to make out is that there has been a little bit of shrinkage, so it does get smaller as we know over time. We're kind of working against time here, so overnight probably not the best choice, but it is what I had available. So let's go ahead and get this out of here, and once again I'm working around the camera. So ordinarily I would take this and immediately try to get it into the, you know, if I was going to make a plaster cast right away, because, you know, it's the fact that it's frozen is what's keeping it from having any problems with the surface being soft from the mineral spirits. But I'm going to, you know, take my time and handle this more than I normally would, just so I can show you what it looks like. But ordinarily we would be trying to get this straight into whatever our ultimate use was. And again, one of the things I really kind of like about this silicone caulk approach is that it stretches so nicely that you can really get things out easily. Alright, so another thing we're going to notice is there's going to be some defects, because I went ahead and just poured the wax straight in rather than pouring it in stages. This is a pretty big pour, and so the wax is going to contract a bit when it freezes, and you can see right there we had a little defect that is due to that. So if I had poured this in a couple stages instead of all at once. But initial impressions are, it is pretty good. Let me get this onto a black background so we can take a better look at it and compare it to our one that we did with the silicone mold. Alright, so I don't know if that's helping or not. So this is the one that we did with the two-part silicone mold. And this is the one we just did with the... Get to the focus. Oh, camera's having a little difficulty with that. Not sure how well you can see that. I'm going to take a look at it. Actually, this is not as good. There's some definite loss of detail here, which is not matching what I was getting earlier. I wonder why that is. So yeah, so it's not quite as good. I feel like I was getting better results before. Alright, Alright, I finally got the camera figured out, so we get a close-up here. And you can see the detail really is not as good. I thought it was better. I swear I've gotten better results before. If we compare that to this one, you can actually, I don't know if you can see it, if I get that angle just right, you can actually see the lines from the model there, just here. That's like actually in the original model. Let me see if I can find a big one. There are actually some, can I get this to focus? Those lines are actually present in the original model, and they're in the two-part silicone mold. The wax one we did there, they're actually transferring such that they wind up in the wax, which is great. And we're not seeing that. The results are pretty good. Come on, focus. There we go. Really pretty good, but not amazing. The one thing I can think of is I was using beeswax in some of my other experiments, and I wonder whether that is a little bit more resilient to the mineral spirits. This is paraffin, which I know is very, very susceptible. Alright, well, we'll try again. One possibility is that it's the mold, that the silicone is not taking the detail the way we want it to. So let's actually go ahead and rip this open and compare it. Still smell the vinegar in this thing. This is only, did this last night. This was mixed up about 12 hours ago, so it's still curing a bit. And it is tough stuff. It's actually hard to cut with the knife. Also hard to do through the camera like I'm trying to do. Alright, there we go, it's ripping. Alright, let's have a look in here. Okay. So, I don't actually see, put this in macro mode. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see this, but those little lines, like the little detail lines that we see on the two-part silicone mold, if you can see those lines, those actually are present here in the hardware store silicone mold. Try to get that. It is very difficult, very challenging. Anyway, they're there. So this does look like a problem with getting the wax to pick up the detail rather than a problem with the mold. The mold itself looks like it's going to work. So I have one more thing I can try, which is I'm going to try some carnauba wax. Now I swear I got this to work reasonably well before. But again, I was using beeswax, so maybe this is just an issue with the particular wax I'm using. So let's give that a try. Alright. So this is carnauba wax? Carnauba? I don't know. I think it's carnauba. And when I did some experiments by just like dunking various types of wax into mineral spirits and leaving them sit, this one did the best. It really didn't seem to dissolve much at all. It's a very hard wax. I usually use it for polishing, like, you know, things I do in the lathe or whatever, and it's very, very hard. It's some sort of vegetable-derived wax. We'll see. I haven't actually tried this yet. This is the first time, so I really thought the wax was going to work. I think maybe my mistake was my experiments were using beeswax. And then I went ahead with the paraffin when I showed you here, and again, I know that the paraffin is very susceptible to mineral spirits. Like I said, I tried dissolving, or not dissolving, but immersing beeswax, paraffin, and the carnauba wax in, in mineral spirits, and observed them over time, and the beeswax definitely did better than the mineral spirits, so it might just be that it really is too susceptible. We'll try this, come back in a couple hours, and see if maybe the carnauba is picking up any of the detail that does seem to be present in the mold. Alright, I got a little smarter and we come over here to the microscope where I've got a side raking light on this thing and we can see the, this is the one made from the silicone, the 2-part silicone mold. And you can see the detail there is very good. There's a little few defects, some bubbles and whatnot that could probably deal with by vacuuming the wax in the mold using the vacuum chamber. I've played around with that a little bit, not too much yet. Here is the one that we made with the hardware store silicone mold with the paraffin wax, and you can see it's really just not as good. Right, we do pick up a little bit of the detail there. You can see just a little bit of those lines coming through, but it's a little mushy through the face. Just not as good. Now, here's the one I just did with the carnauba wax. I'm going to keep saying carnauba. And obviously, huge amount of defects in terms of some bubbles, some porosity, but I got a little impatient here. And I pulled out of the mold before perhaps I should have. The interesting thing is here, we're definitely seeing the detail. Like, even though it's all pitted and everything, this is a generally much crisper model than the one we were getting with the paraffin. So I think the wax type might matter. It really did stick to the mold. Like when I pulled it out, a lot of it came away on the sides of the hardware store silicone, so that might be something that needs to be overcome, but generally speaking this is promising, so I think I might need to play with this a little bit more. I also got some dental casting wax, and I may have to try that again, but I think I probably need to start over with my silicone mold. It's got a ton of the carnauba wax stuck in it now, and also since we're over a day from when we started with the mold, it's shrunk a bunch, and so like I said, these molds are essentially one-time use. They're essentially disposable with this approach, so I think I might need to start again, but progress nonetheless. I thought I was going to be done. I thought this was going to be it, but apparently when I took a close enough look to actually show it to you all, then the flaws became apparent. So we'll keep trying though. Alright, well, off camera I went ahead and did it again, made a brand new mold from silicone. And I made let that cure, and then I went ahead and poured beeswax into it this time, since that's the only thing I can think of that was different than the last time when I thought I was having success. Although, I can't say that I was looking at it under the microscope, so perhaps I just wasn't observing closely enough. I'm pulling the item, the new wax figure, out of the mold right now, and as soon as I get it free, I will stick it under the microscope and we'll have a look at it. Alright, what you're seeing right now is the one from the 2-part silicone mold. So here is our beeswax mold. It's not bad. Let's compare the detail in the eyes there. Yeah, you can definitely see the mold detail there, like the lines from the 3D print and the 2-part silicone. You can't, you can see them a little bit underneath the eyes. And you can definitely see them down here at the base. That is pretty good. Let's compare with the 2-part one again. Yeah, it's clearly crisper. But really, it's pretty good. Not perfect by any stretch, but it is not bad. I think we might have to call that a success. The next step is going to be to cast these in metal and see what the result is. I'm going to flip these over and look at the back real quick. One thing I'm noticing is that as I touch it, it is a little gummy. So again, it seems like we get a little bit better detail on the one with all the mineral spirits in the mix. Yeah. Qualified success. All right, I couldn't help myself. I had to do one more. This one I just pulled out of the mold, and the big difference here was, well, two. Of course, I changed two things. One is I froze the mold before I put the wax in. So I poured wax into a frozen mold with the idea being that the freezing would prevent the mineral spirits from leaching out. And I think it did help a bit. If we look over here, we can see those layer lines, or whatever that is, maybe just from the model, maybe not layer lines. But you can also see there's a lot of surface imperfections. Now, like I said, I changed two things. One was I froze it, and the other one was I put cornstarch into the mold because I was afraid that if I had put the wax straight in there, because the mold was sitting out of the freezer for a few minutes, that it would condense moisture, and the moisture would interfere. The idea was that the cornstarch would soak that up, but it's possible that it just interfered with the surface. It's also possible that the thing we're seeing is actually a factor from the freezing, like pouring into a cold mold just caused it to not really coat very well. I could easily imagine that to be the case. And of course I didn't run the experiment with just one. You can also see there's a concavity on the side there, which is not surprising given that I poured into a cold mold. There's going to be a fair amount of shrinkage. See the back. I don't know if you can see the back or not from under the microscope. It's actually pretty flat. So not bad. I mean, really not bad at all. But certainly not perfect. By comparison, here's the one we did with the silicone mold, which has a lot of really great crisp detail. You can see those layer lines. Those are actually present on the model that we're printing from. It's starting to get a little bit beat up. It's picking up some gunk from all the other times I've had wax from the other models sitting around. Anyway, thought I'd try it one more time, see if that works. I am obviously completely obsessed. I will have to see if I can stop here or I'm going to keep going. All right, well, I couldn't leave it there. I had to do one more experiment. And really, that turned into one more, and then like 20 more. But what I came up with, in the end, is this. All right, I know it's a little hard to see. There's kind of this frosting on it, but you'll notice that there's some of those layer lines that we got on the gold standard one. I'll show that again real quick. This is the one that we did with the two-part silicone mold. It's been sitting around for a while, and it's held up really well. That, of course, is very, very good, but this is pretty darn close. The detail is really outstanding. There are a few pinholes. There's little bubbles that, let's see if I can point this out. Here we go. Right there. There's a bubble hole. There's a bubble hole. And I'm not entirely sure what those come from. I'm getting these a lot. This is pretty good, though. Really, I wonder if I poured this in aluminum, if it would even matter. I mean, those little layer lines there really tell me that it's picking up on the detail pretty good. I think this sort of white frosting stuff is an effect of the what do you call it? The mineral spirits. There's the word. It is a little flaky, but so why is it blue? It's blue because this is a special type of carving wax. I'll put a link down below. I picked it up on Amazon. It has a much higher melting point, so that raised some challenges. I found that I had to preheat the mold and then pour the wax at a certain temperature that was high enough for the viscosity to go low enough for it to pour into the mold very well, but low enough that I wasn't getting bubbles that I think were the result of boiling the mineral spirits. When the wax would hit, it would boil the mineral spirits and introduce bubbles, and that may actually be what we're seeing here a little bit too with these pinhole bubbles. Anyway, pretty good. I think, though, I am going to stop running experiments with the silicone caulk. I have another material entirely that I want to look at, but that will have to be for another video. All right, like I said, lots of failures in there, but I think we're getting closer. I've actually done a bunch more experiments since the ones that are pictured here. I'll have another video coming up on those before too long that I think might just get us towards where we're trying to go. I don't want to say for sure yet because I kind of thought I was sure this time and it didn't work out that way. A couple things I wanted to note. First of all, I think a lot of what I've done already could be improved with better technique. So for instance, some of the bubbles I was getting in some of those, I'm pretty sure now are due to pouring the wax too hot. That blue wax I showed has a fairly high melting point, although I was well beyond that. And one of the things I learned is that the boiling point of mineral spirits is about 260 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever that is in centigrade, 115, something like that. I'll put it, it'll show up down here. And if you pour above that temperature, then obviously you're going to get bubbles because the mineral spirits, which you know are present, are going to boil. So that was a mistake that I made. I could also do more with vacuuming the wax, and in general just sort of being better about pouring. So there's some technique, I think, there. Another thing I want to talk about is cost. So I said at the beginning of this that one of the things I was looking for was a lower cost option of the two-part silicone alternatives. And I'm not sure I really did that, because if you look at the cost of the two-part silicones, take Umu 30, I think that is, I look at my notes down here, that is about $1.70 for 100 grams. I just picked 100 grams because I've been working with 100-gram units of silicone. So about $1.70 for 100 grams of the Umu 30. So if we compare that to the silicone caulk, hardware store silicone caulk, silicone caulk goes for $1.86 for 100 grams. So we're already over that. And if you factor in mineral spirits as well and the cornstarch, then you wind up with about $1.80 once you factor all that in per 100 grams, which is actually more expensive than Umu 30. Now, that assumes that you're getting 100% yield out of the Umu 30. And I actually found that I don't. As I mentioned before, it doesn't have a good shelf life. I was hoping that the argon that I squirted in there would help keep it longer, but just now it is what? As I record this, it's October 24th. I think I have August 23rd labeled for my open date, so about 2 months. And just the other day when I went to go make a new silicone two-part mold using the Umu 30, I discovered that it was now so thick that I couldn't degas it all the way, and the mold didn't turn out. So I only got about 2 molds out of that thing. And if you factor that in, if you say I'm getting, call it 400 grams of useful product out of that $35 container of Umu 30, you're looking at $9 for 100 grams compared to the $1.80 for the hardware store silicone caulk and the mineral spirits and cornstarch. So again, it really comes down to shelf life. If you are using a lot, if you're making a lot of molds and you're going through the Umu 30, stuff is great. There was no question that I was getting much better results with the Umu 30 than with the hardware store alternative. It also comes down to what kind of resolution you need. As you saw, there was a lot of detail in the two-part silicone one. Much better result from that standpoint than what I was able to get so far from the hardware store silicone alternative. So, you know, take that into consideration. And, you know, I mean, $35 and you get a couple molds out of it, maybe that's worth it to you. For me, I think I'm still going to keep working and see if I can do a little bit better. The other thing I wanted to mention was the updated formula. As I went through and did experiments beyond what I've shown in this video so far, I realized that I could cut the mineral spirits way back, and the ratio I discovered that works pretty well is 100 grams of the silicone caulk, 80 grams of mineral spirits, and 20 grams of cornstarch. And the way I do that is I mix the mineral spirits and the cornstarch together first, and then I add the silicone caulk and mix that together. And then you have to move fairly quickly, because by cutting the mineral spirits back, it starts to thicken up more quickly. So I try to make sure I have the mold and everything all ready and pour the mixture as soon as possible after mixing it. It's not instantaneously hardening or anything like that. You do have, you know, call it 20 minutes of open time. But you want to quickly move to get it poured and degas it if you're going to do that, which I would highly recommend. You will benefit from degassing it to get a better result. And if you do that, then you have plenty of time to sort of work at a reasonable pace and do it. But that ratio seems to work better, you know, something like 100 grams of silicone caulk, 80, 85 grams of mineral spirits, and 20 grams of cornstarch. Could probably pull the mineral spirits back even more. You'd get a thicker mix. you'd maybe have to move a little bit faster. You could maybe compensate for by pulling the cornstarch back a little bit. But I've already done, like, seriously 40 experiments. I have spent well over $100 on silicone caulk alone. So the idea that I'm doing this for cost savings is a little bit ridiculous, but frankly I've been having fun, I've been learning a lot. But my point is that you could continue to experiment and refine that ratio even further. That particular ratio was working pretty well for me, but again, further work could be done there. I think that's all I have to say about this today. You know, obviously, like I said, lots of failures in this particular one. I have continued to experiment. I do have some encouraging preliminary results that carry this forward a little bit more. I still have to finish following up on that and shoot a video, but hopefully I'll get that out before too long. But I hope that you've enjoyed watching me flail around, that you've found it inspiring to maybe have you go out there and make stuff and get smarter and all that good stuff, and I'll catch you next time.